let's now have a look at how we can implement the command pattern in a C# application. And remember, the command pattern can be leveraged across all the different types of C# applications. We are now inside Visual Studio 2019, and I'm looking at a console application. The code here for this console application would be possible to run on any different platform that supports .NET, so you don't have to worry about running the examples on Windows. Now, this very simple application leverages two repositories. The repository pattern is a different pattern that we won't be covering in this course, but mainly, it allows us to now work with the data without having to worry about if it's in memory or leveraging SQL Server or anything like that. You see here that we have our shopping cart repository as well as our products repository. These two data stores allows us to work with both the shopping cart as well as all the products available in my system. The specific implementations of our repositories aren't really relevant to the course. All that we need to know is how to interact with our repository. But in this case here, the product repository keeps track of a few different products. When we create a product repository, it sets up a few example products that we have available in our store. And then, of course, we can perform add, decrease stock, increase stock, get all of the different items that we have available, as well as getting the stock and finding a particular item. And this is all backed by an interface that we call the iProduct repository. We then go ahead and find a product called SM7B, which is a Shure microphone. We then proceed to add our product to our cart, increase the quantity a few times, and if we run the application, it'll now tell us that we have added 5 SM7Bs to our cart, and it'll tell us the total price. So our goal now is to refactor this into leveraging the command pattern, because I don't really want to interact with my repository like this in my application. I rather like to have a layer that takes care of my instructions of what to do, and then this instruction can be leveraged across different types of applications. So the first thing that we need to do is add our command interface. The command interface is simply the contract of how our command manager will interact with our command. So I'm going to go ahead and add this to our business layer in the application. And I will add both the interface of our command as well as the concrete commands in the command manager inside my commands folder in my business project. There are pre-existing iCommand interfaces in the .NET framework. Specifically, they're living inside system.windows.input, and you can leverage that in your applications. But in this case, I simply don't want to reference system.windows.input, so let's introduce our own interface for our command. Now, our command will allow us to execute, check if it can be executed, as well as undoing the command itself. This here is now the contract of what we want our commands to look like in our applications. And if you want to learn more about working with interfaces in C#, there is a really good course on Pluralsight covering exactly how to do that. So now that we've defined how to interact with a command, let's introduce a command manager that allows us to execute concrete commands. Concrete commands is simply implementations of this given interface. We'll simply introduce something that we call a command manager. Because it doesn't have to be specific to working with our shopping cart. We could call it shopping cart command manager, but this will allow us to interact with any type of command. Remember that I said earlier that the command manager will keep track of both executing, checking if the command can be executed, as well as having a list or a stack of the commands that we have previously executed. So let's first introduce our stack of commands that we have executed in this session of our application. So why do we want to use a stack for this? Because we want to use a last in and first out data structure that allows us to then undo our commands in the correct order. The command manager will have two public ways of us to interacting with the manager. We will have an invoke method that allows us to invoke our command. This will first have to check if the command can be executed. If it can be executed, we push this onto our commands stack and then execute the command. Then we also want a way for us to undo all the commands in our stack. Okay, so the command manager now allows us to invoke a particular command. It puts it onto a stack when we want to execute the command, and then we also have a way for us to undo all the commands that we executed. You can play around with the command manager yourself. There are a few interesting things that you could try and implement on your own. For instance, you might want to execute your commands at a later time, or you might also want to be able to save all the commands that have previously been executed and re-execute the entire list of commands when you rerun the application. Although that's a little bit out of scope for this course. So now we have our command manager. Now we need to introduce a few different concrete commands that allows us to interact with our shopping cart as well as our products.